Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Zechariah. We are carrying on a bit slower for chapter 8 because there is a lot of things that we need to cover to be clear on the timing, to be clear on what's happening. And there's a lot of details that will require our attention. Now, in the first 8 verses that we have covered in the past session, we have noted that there is a more futuristic prophecy where Jerusalem will be at peace. And the old men and old women will be out in the streets. The young boys and girls will be out there celebrating. And so I had mentioned to you that they are in good times, they are in safe times, but each of the segment of prophecy needs to be seen by themselves. They are standalone. This is not what we call a historical narrative. It is not flowing one after another. And you can see it even today in verse 9. It starts with the word go. It is like, it is in this way, this is what God said. So go really means in this way. Now, of course, the English just shorten it to this. So we are reading this. The Lord of armies says this way. This is how Jehovah Tzvaot is actually saying. So he says this. He says, let your hands be strong. You who are listening in these days to these words from the mouth of the prophets, those who spoke in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of armies was laid, so that the temple might be built. Now, when we begin this, we need to understand that this has to be broken down into its components, right? First of all, let your hands be strong. It doesn't mean that they are weak hands, they cannot carry bricks. The idea of be strong in this verse is really to be, how should we say, to be strengthened, but better still, be resolute. Be resolute means to be firm, to be determined. Now, let me explain to you why that would be the case. We are talking about the building of the temple. That would be the second temple. And it is at the time of the fourth year of the reign of Darius. In the second year, sometime in the second year, they laid the foundation, but they didn't build the temple. And so verse 9 is a prophetic utterance to encourage the people who were there already in Jerusalem to build the temple regardless of what they see, because there's a lot of trouble happening around them. And so this word, be strong, literally means be resolute, be firm in what you have set out to do. If this is an obedience to God, do it and don't worry about the rest. And that's the message that's here in verse 9. So, you who are listening in these days. Now, whenever you see these days, we talk about at the time of speech, at the time of speaking. From the mouth of the prophets. Now, at this time, we need to be quite well aware that we have the three prophets. We have the prophet of uh, Haggai. Then we have Malachi, and then we have Zechariah. These are what we call the last of the prophets. Now, of course, at this same point in time, we have Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, of course, we won't forget the other two, Yehoshua and Zerubbabel. But more importantly, what we're talking about in the prophets here would be Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah. All three are prophesying around that same time. And they are the ones who spoke in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of armies was laid. At this point in time, you would see that they are living in great difficulties. This we can see in Ezra chapter 4. Right? You can see that in Ezra chapter 4. And there were a lot of people coming, going uh, against them, fighting them, quarreling with them. And that would be something that they had to deal with. And the temple construction was halted. Now, so verse 9 is an encouragement of the time of the speech so that this purpose is achieved. Now, this word, the temple, you'll be keen to know uh, that this word is house, this word is palace. Palace. Now, there are a number of words. Now, of course, the word palace, the palace of God, would really mean that it is the place where God's presence uh, exists. So it is used in a more in a bigger word to focus on the nature. So temple is not exactly the word, but it's an English word that is used to translate the word for palace, hekal, and that's what the Jews would call it, the hekal. Now, this word of the house would be bet. It's literally the house of God, and so the idea here is they need to make sure that the temple of God is completed. It is not just laid in foundation. Now, moving forward in verse 9, it's a continuation in one chunk. Because before those days, now, the idea of before is a very interesting word. It's to the face, right? To the face. To the face or faces, I guess you could use that. To the faces of those days. Now, every time you see those days, uh, it is not the time of speech. Okay, so let me just point out to you. These days, time of speech. Those days, not time of speech. And so the context will require us to see whether it is before or after. Now, this word here says it's before the time of speech, and this would refer to the time of well, I guess you could say, uh, the before this time of speech would be at the time of the exile. At the time of exile, and this would be a reminder. So this is something which the speaker, the audience would actually know. There was no wage for man, nor any wage for animal. For him who went out or who came in, there was no peace because of his enemies. And I've sent all the people against one another. Need us to actually explain this a little bit. The first thing here is this. First, we see that there is no wage and no earning. So the word wage is the idea of earnings, income, I guess you could say, earnings. There's no pay, no wages, no income. Now, what does this mean? You can't do work and people pay you money. You can't sell your livestock. Nobody's paying anything. The time is very poor. There is no money. These are hard times. So time of exile are hard times. And then for the person who went out or came in, and so we talk about there, we are talking about Jerusalem. So we're not talking about Babylon, right? So when there are those people who are still there in Jerusalem, in the land of Judea, it's hard time. Actually, nobody would want to be there in Jerusalem. Whoever is there, they have to live off the ground. There is no trade. But then there is also no peace. No peace, no shalom. Why is there no shalom? Because there are adversaries. Now, who are these adversaries? These are adversaries who are dwellers in the land, that they did not chase out from the time of the conquest. Now, you need to remember that ever since the time of Joshua into the book of Judges, we are duly reminded that the 12 tribes did not finish the job of chasing out all the dwellers who were originally there. As opposed to what Moses did on the eastern shore of the Jordan with King Sihon and King Og, Moses cleared out the entire parcels of land, and so was accorded to Manasseh, to Reuben, and to Gad. Now, the rest of them on the land of Canaan, they didn't finish that job. And so God says in Judges chapter 2 that because you didn't listen to me, I won't listen to you. I will leave them there at your side, and they will always be taunting. They will be poking you. They'll be giving you grief. They'll be giving you pain. And these are the people who are still there in the land. And everyone who went in or out of the city, there was no peace because they are the people who would disturb them. Now, the last sentence here needs a little bit of explanation. The text actually says this. It says, all the people against one another. This word here uh, should be translated this way. The word sent should be let loose. I have let loose everyone. Right? Everyone. And this word here is very strange. Man against his neighbor. God says, I have let loose everyone. I have sort of taken my eyes off them. I have not cared. And everyone is fighting each other. There is no trust and no peace. So it's coming from fellow man. It is also coming from adversaries or enemies. So this idea of no money and no peace is the theme of verse 10. Verse 11. He says, and now I will not treat the remnant of this people as in the former days, declares the Lord of armies. Again, needs us to have a little bit of explanation. Now, first of all, I always remember this is Jehovah Tsevaot, the Lord of armies. So I means God, not anybody else. So God is saying, uh, I will not treat. Now, this idea of I will not treat uh, is not there really in the text. God says that I will not how should we say this? Uh I am not I I am not would be a good word. I am not to the remnant of this people as in the former days. Now, this would be the proper translation. So there is no word treat. It is supplied by the translator to make the verse read a little better in the English. So let me explain. God says, I am not to the remnant of this people. Now, who is this people? This is God's people. This is the Jews. And so one more time, let me just explain myself. The word Jews first appeared in a proper form in the book of Esther. As you know, the book of Esther is set in the time of the exile. And the exile was in Babylon. And the time of Esther was the Medo-Persian Empire. And Esther became a queen. And you need to understand that this word Jews became in popular use in the book of Esther with regards to the people of God. And we call Mordecai. He is a Jew, but he is from the tribe of Benjamin. But he is a Jew. So what do we see is this, that all these people who were in exile was the house of Judah, the southern kingdom. And the house of Judah are called Jews as part of a citizenry, right? They are not Jews because they are the tribe of Judah. They are Jews because of the house of Judah. And under the house of Judah, there were a couple of tribes. There was the tribe of Judah, which is the lead tribe. There was the tribe of Benjamin. There was the tribe of Levi, who were still there with the temple. And so by the tribes, they are known as Jews if they are from the tribe of Judah. But as a whole, we all need to remember that as part of the kingdom of Judah or the house of Judah, all of these are also called Jews as well. So it kind of trips people up when we read the Bible. So we need to understand at what point in time are we speaking of with regards to this people. And it is at the time of Zechariah, which would be after the exile. They are coming back to rebuild the city and the temple. But then we're talking about the remnant of the Jews. Now, every time you see the remnant of the Jews, we are duly reminded that these are the faithful Jews. So not all Jews are faithful. Some Jews are faithful. So God always referred to his people as we move on with regards to the remainder, the remnant, the few of them who are actually faithful, as in the former days. Understand this, the former days are days at of the how should we say, of the former times, of the first time, the first times. Now, by this word, first times, it would be the time of before the exile, before the exile, that God has been warning them through who? Through Jeremiah, through Ezekiel, through Isaiah, through Hosea, Now, all these other prophets was telling them, be faithful to God. But when it came to the point of no return, God says, fine, if you continue to disobey me, I will allow the foreign armies to take you over. And they went into exile. Now, God says to the faithful remnant, it will be different now. Not like the former days when God says, I have given up on Judah. I have given up on the house of Judah. First, the house of Israel, then the house of Judah. God says in verse 11, I will not treat them the same. So the word treat is an idea that is conveyed in the Hebrew. But basically, God is saying, I am not to them. This is the role that God is saying, I am going to say to them now that I am not going to be like the earlier days that God declares. How different is that going to be? Well, in the earlier days, God says, I don't care. When God says, I didn't care, they had no money, they had no peace. So in verse 12 will become the opposite. So the opposite is this. For, and then this word here, for the seed of peace. It says as for, and it should be for now. There will be the seed of shalom. Because in verse 10, there was no shalom, but now there will be. This is what God is saying. And how is it said? The vine will yield its fruit. The land will yield its produce. The heavens will provide their due. And I will give to the remnant of this people all these as an inheritance. Now, this idea here in verse 12 talks about God giving them as a possession. Now, understand that possession does not necessarily mean the land. Possession means anything that God gives to them. So God says, I will give to them and they will have this. What is this? Peace. How do you define peace? And so the peace is defined this way. The vine, which is the tree, will give of its fruit. They're not going to eat grapes, obviously. So you need to think of it as wine. There will be wine. Now, one of the interesting things is that the vine of Israel is the precursor of the vine to the European countries. And so even at this point in time, where you find that it's in the book of Zechariah, coming back from the exile, it is still talking about the vine and the fruit. Then we talk about agriculture. The land will give its produce. Now, the word produce also literally means fruit. The land will have fruit, and the vine will have real fruit. Right? This real fruit, this is the produce, the result of the land. And which means that when they plant, they will harvest. Now, in the land of agriculture, what is important would be water. Now, this idea is dew. Dew would be the moisture of the night. It says here that the heavens will produce, and the word produce here uh, is also to give. So all these words, interestingly, the English says one is yield, the other is provide. They're all the same word. They will give the dew, and this is for the plant to have moisture. And then I will give to the remnant of these people all these as an inheritance. They will have this idea plus dew, moisture, to keep the plants healthy, and they would have fruit of the ground. So what does this mean is all this is to give peace. So one of the things that you find is that the word peace or shalom is not an English word. It is a Hebrew word. Shalom is present because of shalem. Shalem means completion. Their lives would be complete. How would their lives be complete? How would the remnant or the faithful of God's people have a life that is complete? When they have all this, the vine will yield its fruit, the land will yield its produce, the heavens will produce the dew. All of this tells them that they will now have a complete life to eat and drink. All right? To eat and drink. This is a complete life. Life under the sun in the book of Ecclesiastes is eat, drink, and be merry. And they will have all this, and this is what it means by shalom. They are not having shalom because nobody is going to fight them. They are going to have shalom because it's going to be a fruitful land once again. In verse 13, this is also a continuation. He says this in verse 13, then and then, this is important, right? This is and then, after all the shalom has come, you will also see it will come about that just as you were a curse among the nations, house of Judah, house of Israel, I will save you so that you may become a blessing. Do not fear. Let your hands be strong. So now we are going to see that this is going to speak about a future of the time of speech. So what is going to happen is this is going to happen. In the past, no wages, no earnings, no income, no shalom. You cannot live in peace because there is nothing. You can't make a life. So that's why there is no shalom. But then in verse 12, God says, I will give you shalom because you will have a life. And then after you have gotten all this as a possession, then it says it will means future. This will happen. Now, how far in the future, the text doesn't say. So it's up to us to then understand from the text. He says, just as you were a curse among the nations. Now, understand the word nations here is this. This is the goyim. The goyim would be non-Jewish nations. And the word curse, and I would need to explain this. The word curse is important. The word curse here is kalala. No, let me just put it here. It's called kalala. That's the Hebrew. But why is this important? The idea of kalala really is to how should we say, to treat as light or worthless or low or no value. Now that's the idea of this word curse. All right. And so the text is now saying, just as you were a curse, a kalala. That's the idea here, right? A kalala. Just as you were treated as worthless, treated of low or no value. When was this? Well, you need to understand the history. We had the time of uh, Yotam, right? From the time of Yotam, and then after that uh, was a downward spiral. And then it went all the way into exile. This is important for us to understand was at the time of Yotam, at the time of Uzziah, this was called the Silver Kingdom, meaning it is not gold. The gold kingdom would be David and Solomon. The silver kingdom would be Uzziah and Yotam. But after that, things just spiral downwards. And while they were treated as very valuable here, when it hit the exile and Babylon came and took them away, they had no more dignity. Why? Because they are in exile. No dignity. They now answer to a foreign power. That is what it means by a curse. You have become a curse among the nations. Everyone is treating you as no value. I can move you and do anything to you. And this would be among the goyim. So Babylon is a goyim. Assyria is a goyim. Nineveh is a goyim. Medo Persia is a goyim. Now, following on in the metallic image of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, you find that Greece is a goyim. Rome or the Roman Empire is a goyim. So this is what it's saying that no, the people of God is viewed as no importance. But God is now saying, just as you were. And he was actually talking about two groups of people now, the house of Judah, the house of Israel. Now, this is important for us to take note. So, how far down the future are we talking about? God is speaking to the house of Judah, which is incidentally coming back to Jerusalem to rebuild the city and the temple. But the house of Israel is not to be seen because they were already in exile and in all over the place and they never came back. House of Judah came back in small numbers after 70 years. At this time of Zechariah, they're coming back. You should read this in the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. But this word about the future, it will come, is also speaking about a further down future of the house of Israel. And so when we see Ezekiel chapter 37, the last part of 37 would be God will bring the house of Judah and the house of Israel back, which we saw in our previous session in the earlier verses of this chapter, that the nation will return back as 12 tribes. And God says, I will be a help to you. I will liberate you. Right? This is nothing to do with save from sin. It is to liberate you from the nations. I will set you free, and so that no dignity can be with dignity. And so this is salvation for them. That then you may become a blessing. Now, in this case, blessing is not the opposite of curse. Blessing would be good things. And this is from God, right? God says, You will become good things to the nations, to the goyim. Now, this will have to happen as time goes on. Of course, some people would say, well, it's happening because a lot of Jews have invented a lot of things. They were all Nobel Prize winners. I think there's much more to it, because this speaks about even further down in the future when we see the house of Israel coming back to Jerusalem, and good things would be peace, knowledge of God that will cover uh, the seas, right? As waters cover the seas, the knowledge of God will be among the land. And so this in itself is an encouragement to the then people at the time of Zechariah. Many good things is going to happen. It is not what has happened in the past. God says things will change. Now, how far down the road it will change, we see it happening in pieces as it comes together. And so God says, do not fear. Do not be afraid, right? Do not be afraid. Let your hands be strong. Again, same word as we first started in verse 9. Be resolute. Because you know the end game, you must be firm to start to build your temple. That's what is being said, right? Be resolute. It refers back to the building of the temple. Now, perhaps some commentators will say that this will still apply because of the third temple, because this promise will have to happen, that the house of Judah and the house of Israel, being a one people of God, will have to become a blessing to the nations of the world. Now, that would be a way of reading verse 13 as well. So with this, we shall come to the end of our session today, and we will continue from verse 14 tomorrow.